Hello everyone, how's it going? I am the Crusader Historian and here is another video. Today I am going to do a video on the brief history of feudalism. Let's get started. Feudalism is the societal structure where that existed during the Middle Ages, primarily medieval Europe. It was, and this was what was organized, castles, peasants filling the land, tilling the land, knights, horses, lords, ladies, kings, and this was the society that was brought together. However, it feudalism is a rather interesting society. It emerged after the fall of the Roman Empire with a power vacuum. But before we get to that, we should let's go over what feudalism is. Feudalism works like this. There are knights and lords at the top. There are kings and lords at the top. I am sorry about that. There are knights under them, and under that is everyone else, namely the peasants. All people of the various social classes are required have various requirements, privileges, duties, and responsibilities. And we are going to go over them one at a time. The peasants fill up a majority. They are at the bottom of the social class. And we may not think they have a lot of rights compared to we do, and there is some truth in that. However, peasants have a lot more days off than what we usually do, which is surprising because of all the feast days and such going on. However, with understanding what feudalism, however, under the feudal system, peasants, they have various responsibilities and rights. The right they have is protection, and is basically protection. Protection from the fellows, and fellows from their from external enemies. In exchange, they till the land. They give a portion of their harvest or their tax is to someone. People say the peasants are tied to the land, but that is not, there is a gray area. There was something called serfdom with peasants tied to the land, but at the same time, peasants can own their own land. They just have to give a portion of their harvest to the knight or the lord or the king, whoever is their direct overlord. And another responsibility is if the knight or the lord requires help, like help with building the roads or fixing the castle or going to war, a peasant is obliged to help help that person out. The knights are the lowest tier of nobility in the feudal system. Anyone can be a knight. Actually, I will get into that later. I will get into that later. But a knight is a mounted warrior of the nobility, because the nobility are the only ones that can afford to armor and buy and maintain horses. A knight gets a plot of land and gets benefits with gets benefits from the peasants that till the land or work in his area, but in exchange he has to protect them. He answers to a lord, and some may answer directly to the king as part of a retinue. Knights are part of a lord or a king's retinue. The knight is obligated to help the lord, or in some cases the king, in maintaining order and protecting and enforcing the laws in his area. He is also obliged to answer the call to war when his lord issues a call to arms, and to bring some levies with him. Lords, and they have various ranks from dukes and princes all the way down to counts, barons, and earls. In a warrior society, such as the feudal system, many of these lords are also given a knighthood, but the lords run the areas. They have more land that they oversee, and they get rulership over that land. But in exchange, they are sworn an oath to help their leader, ranging their leader, help their liege lord in when he gives a call to arms or for support, or in some cases for guidance, because many lords sat on the council of the king. And this leads to the king. The king is the head of state, the leader of a nation, the leader of a people. He is acknowledged as king, but at the same time, it's his responsibility to lead the realm, govern the realm, and administer justice and order. And that is how the feudal system is supposed to work. And during the Middle Ages, in the feudal system, the king is seen as a first among equal. But as you can see throughout the Middle Ages, that changes. The feudal system officially had its origins in the early Middle Ages. This is the period ranging from around the time of the fall of the Roman Empire, which is about the 6th century to the 10th century. In addition to various other reforms that took place, this is the early origins of feudalism. Well, feudalism kind of was experimented on in late antiquity, which is the 5th and 6th century, but it really became officially practiced by around this point. Lords like Charlemagne and the lords under him would give land to knights coming around. These knights had their origins from ritter or rider, mounted warriors, heavily armed and armored for their time, and they would ride around serving as a primary core to a lord's army. And they were given land for their own in exchange for military service. And that is the origins of feudalism. There is also a lot of adventuring taking place during this period. Adventuring is primary common during this time period. And that's the origins of feudalism. Feudalism came into its own during the High Middle Ages, which was around 1000 AD to 1300 AD. This is considered the high point of feudalism, and it's around this point where the code of conduct of the classes was solidified. This is where the code of chivalry came around. The tales of the knights in armor, the heroic tales of the Crusades, and the ideals of a knight that we take even to our day, including the concept of chivalry, had its origins right here. This period saw a power of the landed nobility, and it's around this time point where the king is seen as a first amongst equals. This is where many origins of concepts of justice and rights came in, like the idea of being tried by a council of your peers had its origins here, and and the idea of land, and yeah, and so this area had a rather basic balance of power, a rather fragile one, but it somehow worked. There were a lot of stuff going on. Chivalry, knight chivalry, heroic ideals. Romanticism had its origins right here, like the courtly love idea. This had its origins right here. And some ideas that we think about today had its origins here. The late Middle Ages, which lasted from about 1300 AD to 1500 AD, saw the feudal system suffer a decline. It was still around, but this is where problems started to happen. This was around the time point when centuries of prosperity and growth in Europe came to a halt. Like, remember the High Middle Ages, which I call the Golden Age of chivalry of the feudal system. It's now coming down right here. The Black Death came in this time period, along with several famines. There were a lot of wars going on. Furthermore, the Crusades failed at this point. And the arrival of nation states came. What happened was before the Black Death, the nobles and the kings felt like they were more charitable. They would give alms constantly. The upper classes would constantly give alms to the poor, thinking they would, like, sort of like getting in the good graces of God, to like alms to the poor to increase the chances of their soul getting to heaven and lowering the time they spent in hell. But the Black Death came around, and it did not discriminate. It destroyed nobles. It destroyed peasants. It did not discriminate, and it left a huge power vacuum. For the peasants, for the lords, there was not enough of them left anymore. And so they had to make some compromises with the peasants, such as increased wages. Some of the wealthier peasants were given more wiggle room to buy their way into the nobility, and this was the beginning of the end for feudalism. For the peasants, they got several of them moved up in the world, and they, you could say, lost faith in the feudal system, or probably would have. I mean, if a feudal system is based on as a peasant, your knight is promised to protect you, and your knight died, you're gonna wonder what is going on in this world. Also, the neglect of the Crusades had a failure at this point because many nations were looking to their own affairs. Many noble families died out, but there is one thing that remained: the monarchy. And the monarchies of Europe started centralizing power. Because there is a little caveat to the feudal system. If a lord or a knight had no heirs to pass on their land to, it reverts back to the crown. And the crown kept these areas. And over time, they got stronger and stronger. And this created a power imbalance. Because the kings stopped being a first among equal and became more of like an autocrat, which was not how the feudal system was designed. I'm going to get more into that in a later video, but basically the king having power, more power than the nobles, caused a fragile power imbalance. But remnants were still there. I mean, up until the Hundred Years' War and the War of the Roses, the kings of Europe had to keep the lords happy to an extent. But the beginning of the end was right here. The death knell of the feudal system had its origins in the Renaissance period from the 15th to the 16th centuries, and and after that the early modern period. This was at the arrival of powerful professional armies. The feudal system was created as a central point of contact to receive soldiers. Well, if the crown had or the monarch has enough land to finance and build their own professional army, they did not need the nobility anymore. The nobility was kept around, but they were irrelevant at this point. And from this point on, it created the concept of nation states. And this is where the flaws of feudalism were shown. It had no answer to someone overstepping their bounds in the whole contract agreement. Again, I'm going to explain more in the next video. When I was talking about the history of feudalism, I was largely referring to Europe, like classically, like what we call Europe. I mean, I consider Europe from the Iberian Peninsula to Greece, and consider Russia as part of Europe. But I understand various areas of the world are more fluid. What you can say I was referring to as the feudal world was the area of Western Europe and the influential areas of the Catholic Church, which had a lot of these areas under their sway. Now, I will say this: the elements of the Eastern Orthodox Church, like Russia, even Rus, the Byzantine Empire, they had some similarities to feudalism, but not quite. I mean, Japan and China also had degrees of feudalism, but there was not enough information for me to glean for me to put it into a video for you guys to understand. So just understand that while feudalism is while commonly seen as part of Europe, or Europe from Germany, Poland, all the way to England and Spain and Portugal, there are variants in the eastern half of Europe, like the Byzantine Empire, Russia, and other parts of the world, like Japan and China. They have some similarities, but they have some differences, and it is confusing. As for sources, um, I will be honest, I got all this from a basic overview of looking at everything. I mean, just type in feudalism on Google and take a look about it. But my professor at the University of Maine in Orono, she taught the late Middle Ages course, and she also talked a little bit about this. But there are a series of articles written by some historians at the Real Crusades History, the link down below, who branched in about feudalism because it because there were some disputes regarded in the Crusader states relating to feudalism, and the concept of feudalism were explained in these articles. And I will post the link to the blog to the articles down below, and feel free to read them at your leisure. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. Please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Um, um, I am planning on doing another video very shortly that looks into the deeper concept of feudalism, and and if you are in the Bangor, Maine area, please check this very cool selfie museum called Selfie Space in Brewer, right across the river. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.